Whitey Bulger's not going to get down on his knees for anybody.
In part 1, we explored the rise and fall of John Gotti, but as powerful as Gotti was,
I'm just getting started.
his criminal empire pales in comparison to the terror that unfolded in Boston under the reign of another notorious gangster, James Whitey. In part 2, we enter the dark underworld of Boston, where Bulger built his empire not just through violence, but by forging a secret alliance with the very people sworn to bring criminals to justice. Unlike Gotti, who thrived on media attention, Bulger operated in the shadows. His empire, built through extortion, drug trafficking and murder, was fortified by fear. But what truly set Bulger apart from other criminals was the dark alliance he forged with the FBI, an alliance that allowed him to rule Boston unchecked for nearly 2 decades. Whitey Bulger, born September 3, 1929, Dorchester, Massachusetts, U.S., died October 30, 2018, U.S. Penitentiary, Hazleton, Brewston Mills, West Virginia, was an American crime boss who, as head of the Boston area Winter Hill Gang, was a leading figure in organized crime from the late 1960s to the mid-1990s. For more than a decade, until his capture in June 2011, he was listed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, as one of its 10 most wanted fugitives. Bulger was born to working-class Irish immigrants and grew up in a housing project in the neighborhood of South Boston. In his early years, he earned the enduring nickname Whitey on account of his whitish blonde hair. An unruly youth, Bulger was involved in a street gang as a teenager and was arrested several times on charges ranging from forgery to assault and battery. However, he always managed to elude any serious consequences for his wrongdoing, which nurtured in him a sense of entitlement and invincibility. In 1948, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. Despite a record of disciplinary problems while in the service, which included a rape charge in Great Falls, Montana, his discharge 4 years later was certified as honorable. Bulger soon resumed his criminal activities, and in 1956 he was convicted for a string of bank robberies committed in 3 states. Although sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, he was granted parole in 1965, following stints at such notorious penitentiaries as Leavenworth and Alcatraz. Upon his return to Boston, Bulger became an enforcer for mob kingpin Donald Killeen, and in the early 1970s, he took on similar duties with the Winter Hill Gang, a predominantly Irish-American crime syndicate led by Howie Winter.
He realized, I get a blank check, I can do anything I want.
In 1975, Bulger agreed to work with the FBI as a so-called top echelon informant.
The top echelon criminal informant program was geared towards developing top echelon mobsters, primarily mafia members, who by definition have all killed at least once.
His FBI handler was another son of South Boston, John J. Connolly, who was about 10 years younger than Bulger, and who had grown up idolizing him along with Bulger's brother William, who became a powerful Massachusetts politician.
We want to know what the relationship was, if any, with Billy Bulger. How closely connected he was with his brother, whether he knew that his brother was an FBI informant. Did he know that?
The simple answer is he knew nothing about it, and his brother wanted it that way. That was at his decision when we first had the relationship, the business relationship.
This is an announcement by the FBI.
The informant relationship quickly turned corrupt, becoming what was later described as a devil's deal, and giving rise to the worst informant scandal in FBI history.
I'm just getting started.
I can help you, Jimmy, and you can help me.
Here's the deal.
James Whitey Bulger is...
Bulger's empire was built on fear, violence, and control. If anyone stood in his way, they didn't stand for long. Paul McGonigal, a rival gang leader, learned this the hard way. In 1974, Tensions between Bulger's Winter Hill Gang and McGonagall's Mullen Gang came to a head. Lured into a meeting under the pretense of resolving their differences, McGonagall was shot in the head by Bulger himself. His body was buried in a shallow grave, another rival eliminated. But Bulger wasn't just a gangster. He was strategic. He understood the value of alliances, not only with criminals, but with law enforcement. And it was Connolly approached Bulger with an offer that would cement their bond. A deal that allowed Bulger to provide the FBI with information on the Italian mafia in exchange for protection. Connolly wasn't just turning a mobster into an informant. He was giving Bulger a license to kill, steal, and extort without fear of prosecution. As long as Bulger kept the information flowing, Connolly kept the heat off. With Connolly shielding him, Bulger's criminal enterprise flourished. He extorted local businesses, forcing them to pay protection money or face dire consequences. Drugs flooded the streets of Boston. Despite Bulger's public stance against narcotics, his empire profited immensely from the trade. Those who defied him or even spoke too much disappeared. In 1982, Bulger's violence escalated to new heights with the murder of John Callahan, a businessman who had ties to Bulger's extortion racket. Fearing Callahan might cooperate with authorities, Bulger ordered his execution. His body was found stuffed in the trunk of a Cadillac near Miami International Airport, a bullet hole in his skull. Another victim silenced. While bodies piled up, Connolly's star rose within the FBI. He was hailed as a brilliant agent, receiving promotions and accolades for his work dismantling the Italian mafia. But beneath the praise, Connolly was more than just Bulger's handler. He'd become his protector. Connolly and other agents provided Bulger with sensitive information, tipping him off about investigations and rival gangs, allowing him to evade justice and expand his power. A fellow FBI informant, Stephen Flemmi, became his top lieutenant, establishing a racket by which he extorted money from bookmakers, loan sharks, drug dealers, and other local criminals. Bulger soon acquired a fearsome reputation both within and beyond the illicit underworld. Over time, Bulger's corrupt relationship with his FBI contact Connolly and the FBI office deepened.
Well, they indicted these people for gambling and loan sharking. And they were allowed to do it. It was a policy devised by Jerry O'Sullivan from the Strike Force. It was communicated to them on several occasions by John.
Safe. In 1981, Bulger murdered Deborah Hussey, the stepdaughter of his partner, Steve Flemmi. Hussey had become a liability. Her drug addiction and loose talk threatened the gang. Bulger strangled her to death and buried her body in a secret location. A few years later, Deborah Davis, Flemmi's girlfriend, met a similar fate. Like Hussey, she knew too much, and Bulger's solution was as final as ever. John Connolly's protection of Bulger wasn't just about keeping him out of prison. It was about actively facilitating his crimes. Connolly frequently alerted Bulger to other authorities' investigations into the Winter Hill Gang's operations and cast a blind eye even to the murders that the organization perpetrated. By the early 1990s, the compromised integrity of the FBI with respect to Bulger had become apparent to local and state police, who, along with the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, then launched a new investigation. In January 1995, Bulger, Flemmi, and several others were formally charged with multiple counts of racketeering and extortion. Tipped off by Connolly in advance of the indictment, however, Bulger fled the area. Connolly fed Bulger crucial information about federal investigations, even tipping him off in 1995 when an arrest was imminent. Armed with that knowledge, Bulger fled Boston and disappeared, beginning a 16-year run as one of America's most wanted fugitives. But the truth about Connolly's relationship with Bulger couldn't stay hidden forever. By the early 2000s, the extent of Connolly's corruption began to unravel. Investigations revealed that Connolly had passed information to Bulger that led to the murder of John Callahan. For this, Connolly was convicted of second-degree murder in 2008, receiving a 40-year sentence. From prison, Connolly continued to maintain his innocence, insisting he was just following FBI protocol. John Connolly's betrayal of Whitey Bulger was as shocking as it was ironic. For years, Connolly had been Bulger's protector within the FBI, tipping him off about investigations and helping him avoid prosecution. Their relationship, built on mutual benefits, allowed Bulger to dominate Boston's criminal underworld with impunity. However, when Bulger went on the run in 1995, Connolly's loyalty to him eventually unraveled. As federal investigators closed in, Connolly, facing legal pressure himself, distanced from Bulger and ultimately became a key figure in exposing the depth of corruption within the FBI. His betrayal came not in a direct act of turning on Bulger, but in his failure to maintain their once impenetrable alliance, leading to Bulger's downfall. Connolly's actions, first shielding, then indirectly abandoning Bulger, left the notorious mob boss vulnerable and ultimately contributed to his capture and conviction. Connolly's downfall exposed a much darker reality, one that went beyond a single agent's betrayal. Congressional hearings revealed how the FBI's top echelon informant program had allowed Bulger to commit heinous acts while being shielded by law enforcement. The corruption ran deep, with agents, prosecutors, and even federal judges implicated in the conspiracy to protect Bulger. It was a betrayal of justice on an unimaginable scale. Bulger's capture in 2011 finally brought the violent chapter to a close. When he was found living in Santa Monica, California, with his girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, investigators uncovered a stash of weapons and nearly $1 million in cash hidden inside the walls of his apartment. Bulger's trial in 2013 revealed the full extent of his crimes, 31 counts, including 11 murders. But Bulger's story didn't end there. In 2018, while serving his sentence at a West Virginia federal prison, Bulger was brutally murdered by fellow inmates within hours of his arrival. His attackers, reputed to be mob-connected, beat the 89-year-old to death with a padlock and a sock, crushing his skull and gouging out his eyes. It was a savage end, reflecting the violent world he had once ruled. Whitey Bulger was killed on October 30th, 2018, by fellow inmates just hours after being transferred to the Hazleton Federal Prison in West Virginia. The inmates believed to be involved in his murder were Fotios Freddie Gias, a mafia hitman from Springfield, Massachusetts, Bulger de Cologero, a Massachusetts gang member, and another unnamed inmate. Gias, in particular, had a reputation for being a brutal enforcer, and his disdain for informants was well known. The reasons behind Bulger's murder are rooted in his notorious status as a government informant. Throughout his criminal career, Bulger had secretly worked as an informant for the FBI, providing intelligence on rival gangsters, most notably members of the Italian mafia. For men like Freddie Gias, who adhered to a strict code of mafia loyalty, the idea of someone cooperating with law enforcement was the ultimate betrayal. Bulger's status as a rat made him a target from the moment he arrived at Hazleton, which housed many violent criminals with connections to organized crime. It's widely believed that Bulger's murder was a form of prison justice, a calculated attack in retaliation for his role as an informant. His killers reportedly knew of his arrival beforehand and quickly acted on the opportunity to exact revenge. Bulger's violent death at the hands of men who despised everything he stood for was seen by many as the inevitable conclusion to his life of crime, betrayal, and corruption. The manner of his death was seen by many as a form of mob justice, long delayed but inevitable, bringing his story full circle. From a feared crime boss to a betrayed and ultimately fallen figure in the criminal world, both John Gotti and Whitey Bulger built their empires on crime, but it was betrayal that ultimately sealed their fates. Both men, once at the top, fell victim to the same force they relied on: betrayal. Thanks for watching. Till the next one, stay safe and stay curious.